All right. Hello. So this is my very infrequent podcast, um, titled The Revolution, where I really like to get into the nitty-gritty of things that are not deemed spiritual, but that can really push us either on the spiritual path or that require a lot of spiritual support without necessarily getting tagged that way in the wellness or the spiritual field. So I think most people that are here probably know me. Hi, I'm Julia. Um, I'm an astrologer and a tarot card reader and many, many other things. And I will pass it over to Sara so you can introduce yourself. And then we'll dive into today's topic, which is going to be all about sobriety and sober curiosity and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Julia. As she said, my name is Sara. I am a yoga teacher, Reiki energy healer, and sound healer, sound meditation. I'm also still currently a part-time pharmacist. And
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Fun fact.
Fun fact, I still work about 2 days a week in the pharmacy. So
Listen, that's full body wellness right there.
Oh,
Both
yeah.
sides of the spectrum.
Everyone's like, people that learn that, they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, that's the world I'm coming from. So it's kind of cool to have, both
But
sides.
that's balance. Honestly, it is both. We need both. And we need both in different ways. So I think that's great. You're getting both sides and you'll be able to guide people both ways without sometimes spiritual people. I mean, let's just call a spade before we jump into things. But sometimes spiritual people discredit without any grounding for it medical fields, medical anything in medicine. And there needs to be a balance between the two. So you'll have like that healthy balance, you'll be able to guide people from that space. I think that's brilliant. Oh no, did I lose you?
I lost.
Okay, I gotcha.
Okay, there. Okay,
Got me?
hopefully. Yeah, you're here. Sorry,
Okay.
I hope it's not me.
No, it's okay.
Good.
All right, so let's dive in. I don't know how. I guess it was through your Instagram that I also recognized that you were sober. And this for me, my sobriety is, and you could tell me if you feel the same way, it's such a personal testament of like, wow, if I didn't do anything else in this lifetime, I did something so incredible by really taking this journey seriously. And so it always stands out to me when other people are sober because you don't see a lot of it, especially with our age group. I think you're seeing a lot of it more now because of what's going on astrologically. We have Saturn, which is like a restrictive type of energy moving through Pisces, which is anything addictive. So there is this shift that is happening collectively, and we're seeing that come through like tons of zero proof stuff or like non alcoholic menus or mocktail menus popping up places. But I don't know how long you've been sober for, but even since my journey began, which was my sober curiosity journey, probably began around 6 years ago. And my full sobriety journey has been about just over 3 years. We hit 3 years in April for me. So even 3 years ago, there was not mocktails on menus. This is like so up and coming, at least not in the way we're starting to really see it now. So it's really great to also then see other people who are going through the same journey. So tell me a little bit about where your sobriety journey came from. Like, how'd you get here?
Yeah, so very similar. I remember seeing you post something, and I too have been sober for 3 years in April.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think we were like a day apart. I was just like, oh my God, that's, such a cool synchronicity. But yeah, so honestly, I didn't drink like a ton earlier in college. I actually was more geared towards like wellness, probably in an unhealthy way. I did have really bad anxiety and depression, and I managed it with more of an eating disorder
Mm.
throughout college. Later on, I started to drink a little more and, experiment with other things. And then I would say that around like my wedding planning time, I just started to like daily have a drink and be like, okay, this is such, wow, I can really just like decrease my anxiety and chill and get all this stuff done. And I wasn't even like outwardly that stressed about my wedding. Like I didn't like, I didn't seem like I cared that much, but it was just a lot of things to do, like a lot of to-do lists, a lot of
Yeah.
little and someone with I've also, been diagnosed with ADHD, so getting me to like sit still and do boring tasks has always been a challenge. So I would say probably around that time is when I almost daily started to drink just to manage my anxiety. And I was on medication at the time, both for ADHD and anxiety. And so it just kind of felt like it just kind of helped like chill me out. And I was doing a lot of yoga at the time and I knew I loved it. And eventually I did my yoga teacher training in 2019. And that's when, and I always knew, deep down you have this little voice that's like, this is not good for you. Like, why are you doing this every day? And I just kept trying to quiet the voice and be like, whatever. And, eventually, probably for a while, I was drinking at least like a bottle of Prosecco every night, like at least. And then, um, the weekends, it would be like noon and I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna like have a drink, like have a mimosa. Like it just became
Yeah.
a pattern. And once you start drinking, then almost when, it was never to the point where, I couldn't work or like I was really drinking like at work or anything, but it was the daily use. And I did my teacher training and that really, started to make me question my decisions and really take a look at myself. And um yeah, I knew I wanted to cut down at least or stop, but my nervous system was so dysregulated. I was living in Boston. I was at school in Boston at the time.
Mm.
Um, and I just know it was just, I didn't know how to self-regulate, we're not really like taught that. And um, I actually had a Reiki session, one of my friends from my teacher training. So this was back in 2020, I think during the pandemic. And I was like, I'm never going to teach yoga. Um, that was too anxiety provoking to be in front of a class. And I had a Reiki session and it really changed my life. It was like, what is this? I felt like I calmed down for the first time ever. And yeah, I just knew that energy work and Reiki was something that I was like here to do.
Mm. Oh, I
Mm,
love that.
yeah.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's interesting to me how people get to this part of their journey because you really don't ever see two things the same as far as like people deciding to get sober. And I will say that mine came similar where um it wasn't a daily use, but my sober curiosity began with a questioning of my relationship to alcohol. That's
Mhm.
where it started. And at the time, I mean, probably similarly, like I was in my early 20s and then my mid 20s, and everybody was drinking. And really, alternative to that, like when I was in high school, and kind of like you said, when I was in high school and like everyone used to go out and drink, and like I would call my mom and be like, "Can you pick me up?" Like I was so uninterested in it for so long. And then I had like a bit of a, I would say, a real healthy relationship to it when I worked for Disney
Mhm.
because I worked with a bunch of older people. So I had a fake ID. I'd go out, but because they were all older, they weren't getting trashed. It was just like we would go out, we would have a nice time, we would sit at a jazz bar, we'd have a drink. And where it really started to shift was when I started working in Manhattan.
Mm.
Because then it wasn't just that, it was like people doing lines off tables and being like, you want one? And I'd be like, I don't even know where to get cocaine. So the fact that you just have this out right now is mind blowing to me. Um, and because I was never really more on that end of things, I always made up for it with like, oh, I go to every happy hour, or I do this, or I do that. And I probably should have started questioning it. I was roofied
Mm.
in when I was in Manhattan, like really bad. And my ex at the time, the train station where I lived on Long Island was like, it's like up on a platform, like a huge platform. Like you have to go down a bunch of stairs. Like I couldn't walk down the stairs. He had to come up and pick me up and like carry me down.
Oh.
Um, and like crawled off the train with my phone and my wallet in my mouth because like I couldn't, like my body, I couldn't even stand. And I should have stopped drinking then. I like look back on that and I'm like, why would I ever put myself in another position to like feel like that? And afterwards, I stopped drinking for a while. And then I started dating somebody who, you know, undiagnosed, this is not a clinical, but a functional alcoholic.
Mhm.
And everything revolved around the socialization and the drinking. It
Mhm.
was a consistent third person in the relationship with us.
Mhm.
And this became such a question in my mind of like, do I want to be out every weekend? Do I want to be drinking every weekend? And I wasn't even drinking a lot. I was always usually driving because he drank a lot more. But still, then I was playing a game of like, well, how early do we have to go out so that I can have 2 drinks and sober up by the time he's drunk and drive home? And I'm like, why am I doing mental gymnastics to drink? Like, and so I started implementing boundaries. I had an adult tantrum. We had a contentious relationship, I will say, at least specifically very much towards the end. And he showed up to a mutual friend's birthday party with another girl. And I just like lost it, like years and years of like, and at this point I was kind of drinking, um, like I wouldn't drink for like 6 months and then I would binge and like have like a full day where I would, we'd go to brunch and then you'd just go out and you'd drink all day and I'd be trashed. And I was definitely like blackout drunk, had an adult tantrum, called everyone and their cousin, crying, screaming, yelling, throwing things. And I just felt like I needed my mom. I was like, I
Mhm.
just want my mom. I just want to go home to my mom's house. And all of my friends got me home to my apartment. And I was like, you don't understand. I want to go to my mother. And
Mhm.
I came into my mom's house. My sisters, who have like never seen me drunk, are like holding English muffins. My mom's like, do you need a bucket? Are you going to throw up? And I'm like, no, I just want to be home. And I remember waking up the next day and being like, I feel like such a disappointment that my sisters saw me in like such a state. And I had a real heart to heart with my mom about this relationship and not really about the alcohol, but more like this whole dynamic is really just not healthy. And this is a part of that. And I was like, I'm not drinking anymore. I was like, that's it. Like, I'm not drinking anymore. I don't want to drink anymore. And that was 3 years ago in April. And it has been one of the most clarifying journeys because everything from the second I got sober until I got here, it started with that questioning of like, why is my relationship with alcohol like this? Where is it coming from? Why am I drinking when I'm sad and not when I want to celebrate? Like, why is this my go to when I'm not feeling great or like when I don't feel good and I want to feel better? Why is this the thing that I'm reaching for? And I started having a lot of these questions. I started reevaluating my relationship with it before I would let myself drink. And at that point, I was just like, nothing good comes from this. Every single time I want to drink, it's never because I'm happy and I'm feeling good. I'm like, because when I'm happy and I'm feeling good, I don't need something to make me feel better. And
Mhm.
this is why I'm reaching for it to feel better. And I'm like, and there are other coping mechanisms that I have to support that. And the second I got sober was the second I started doing this work full time. And it could not have come. I got sober that April. I got a job at Omega starting that July. It was like literally like this. The universe was just waiting for me to have that clarity moment to be able to get into it. And it's so fascinating to me how different people get to this part of the journey. But the thing I find the most interesting is how everyone has that voice that's like, this probably doesn't sound good. This isn't good. You probably shouldn't do this. Do you really need that right now? And that suppression, like you said, of that voice, because it requires a lot of self reflection to be able to not just be sober, but to look at your relationship with alcohol in general. And I think a lot of us, especially here in America, I think a lot of us are going through a great awakening on so many different levels, but especially around this ideology of like, we as a country, as a like societal connection, do not have a healthy relationship to alcohol. And that's not just like me or you, that is like many, many people probably undiagnosed with addiction issues and not even recognizing it because, like you said, I'm not missing work. I'm not, so it's not a problem. It's like, but it can be. It
Yeah.
certainly can be.
Yeah.
So when you went through that sobriety piece,
Mhm.
do you feel like your spirituality also heightened?
100%. And I mean, the only reason I got sober is because of my spirituality and opening back up to having faith in something beyond, this universe. There's no way I would have. I really don't know if I could have gotten sober if I hadn't, sort of opened back up to, yeah, to this deeper connection. And it was something that was really missing in my life. And I
Mm,
think a big reason why I drank is because I knew there was something missing deep down. I just didn't know what. And
yeah.
so, yeah, I would say that. And then the fact that, once I had that Reiki session and then I worked, I still was like drinking on and off. I also was addicted to another substance. I'll say it now because the alcohol was almost easier in a way. I don't know if you've ever heard of kratom.
Mm-mm.
So it's like at this tea like structure. You can actually buy it at like some health food stores,
Mm,
and it has like an opioid like effect. And it
wow.
actually for me, I know. So this is like honestly, this was the harder part. For me, it just like gave me like energy in a way and kind of like chilled
Sure.
me out. But that was the hardest. So, I started working with my mentor, my yoga teacher, that was like, you're going to teach. Like, she really pushed me. I had an astrology reading that really changed my life and sort of recognizing that, I'm here for something else and that I'm here to help heal people and to help other people. And that's honestly the only reason why I started to help myself was realizing I need to do this for other people. Since then, I have grown more deeply in self-love and would now do it for other reasons. But
Yeah.
that really, it was really that. But so I had slowed down with the alcohol. And then finally, after that astrology reading, I was like, all right, I really need to do this. And I went through a mild opioid withdrawal coming off this substance.
Wow.
Um, and that
I'm glad
was
you're okay.
yeah, it was I didn't need like medical assistance. But I tried to do it cold turkey and I was, the
Yeah,
shaking,
you
the sweat
can't.
thing. And so I slowly did it over a month. This was back in 2021. And honestly, that was probably the harder part, but after that, that's when a couple months later I started teaching and started doing some Reiki like on other people, but that's when life really started to shift was when I got sober. That's when we, were able to finally find our house after I started teaching. And yeah, I mean, if I don't believe, I didn't, and I'll never right now I'm like, I don't know that I'll never have a drink again, and I really didn't know where it would lead me, but it's been 3 years, and it's just like the the journey that it's, like, taken me on, I just don't feel like it would be worth it at this point to, like,
Yeah.
reintroduce it. It's kinda like, I get used to it. I'm feeling I did it more, it was a lot of social anxiety too, and not
Mm.
being having, like, no self-confidence, like, nothing, like, literally the worst image of myself ever, and now it's like, after a lot of work and realizing why, and, like, yeah, just reconnecting
Yeah.
with these parts of myself, and um yeah, just leading me here. I can't imagine, like, going back to it at this point, but I don't know, I just I I try not to be, like, so black and white with things, I know there's a lot of things I would never do again, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I've had people tell me like, "Oh, you're being a little dramatic, like you shouldn't, you don't have to like swear this off for forever." And to me, that's always like a mirror of where they are in their journey with alcohol versus like where I am in my journey. And I have thought about it because I'm going to Paris in a couple weeks and I've been like, how am I going to go abroad and like not have a glass of wine or like not go to France and like not have champagne? And then I'm like, honestly, like it's going to be easy to go and do that because at this point I haven't drank in 3 years. So for me to have even one drink doesn't matter if it's higher quality because it's abroad, I'm still going to be tipsy, if not drunk. And like, why deter any part of my trip for that? So it almost like ends up weighing out. And I love what you said about the social piece because that first summer that I got sober, I had like really, really sober. I had everyone and their cousin was getting married. So
Mhm.
I remember going to the first wedding and
Yep.
being like, if I can get through tonight, I can get through anything. And everyone was trashed.
Same.
And I remember everyone was like, I can't believe that it's, oh, I mean, people also taunting you. Like, I'd be like, I'm not drinking. And they'd come and hand you a shot. And you're like, I'm not drinking. Like, that doesn't mean I'll take a shot with you and then drink no less. Like, I'm not drinking.
Right.
So when you have to kind of correct everybody for like a full evening at a wedding where, or like at an event like a wedding where everyone is drinking,
Mhm.
and then I did that every weekend for like basically an entire summer. By the
Yeah.
end of it, I was like, no big deal.
Yeah.
No big deal.
100%.
And now I would say most people know, like I'm going to have dinner with my aunts after this. They're so cute. They're having a beer Olympics. I will be away, but they sent me a little message and they're like, we know you don't drink, but come and have fun. Bring some mocktails and just like whatever. And it's for the most part, most people at this point, in the beginning, I feel like, and you could tell me if you had this too, but in the beginning, I felt like everyone pressured me. And now that it's been 3 years and people know that I'm not going to do it, most people actually congratulate me and they'll be like, "Oh, I wish I could do that," or "I wish I had that piece of the journey." I think it's so amazing that you do that. And then the last event that I had gone to, I went to an event where I brought some mocktails, like bottled mocktails, and they look like a regular drink. People wouldn't know that they have no alcohol in them. And I actually had people coming up to me and they're like, I thought you didn't drink. Like I thought this was a part of your thing. Like I thought that's your thing is you don't drink. And I'm like, I'm not. There it's just juice basically, but I'm like, it's fun for me to hold a drink and feel like I'm in the social piece, without feeling like a total standout. But that's where like a lot of the interesting pieces is getting used to the social anxiety that comes with drinking and then the social anxiety that comes without it and the expectations that come around that too. Do you feel did you or have you, I mean now it's been a couple years for you too, but did you feel pressured?
Honestly, I was shocked that I really didn't. And you know what, the first thing I'll say is I feel like, especially, I mean, I'm not like saying this in a bad way, but like most people, if you're like drinking at a party, they're not focused on what you're doing and
Yeah.
like yourself. Like they're focused on drinking and having fun. And, you know, I just focused on chatting and being present. And like, so after I got sober, this is what I was really nervous about was 2 months later was my little sister's wedding. And
Mm.
when I went through like really getting sober, also my adrenals were so burned out. I came
Yeah.
off of Adderall at the same time, came off of my medications. I did like everything in 3 months, and I don't necessarily recommend that, but I was just like, I'm ready to like see what life is without anything.
Yeah.
And I had her wedding 2 months later, and I had to give a speech, and I was like, and so my like biggest fear, what used to be, is um, you know, really public speaking, and that's really
Mm.
why I thought I'd teach yoga. And so, um, and I did it, and it was honestly, I haven't reflected back on it that much, but that was a really proud moment. It went well. Like I had a little like heart fluttering as I stood up there,
Mhm.
but at the wedding, I don't think one person asked me like, "Are you drinking? Are you having a drink? People might have said, "Do you want a drink?" And I probably said no thanks, and it was like no one asked. And
Yeah.
so I haven't had, you know, and since then, you know, we live in the Berkshires now, and I haven't like it's not like in Boston when going to more restaurants and it just being
Yeah.
around as much. It's, you know, a lot of what I do socially around here now is like yoga and stuff like that. And so, you know, but at the events, the weddings,
Sorry.
yeah, I just find I've gotten used to it, and there hasn't been a ton of I bet you if I had tried to get sober, you know, like I got sober at what, like 33. If I had been in my
Mm.
20s, I could see it being more
Yeah.
challenging
So a
probably,
little bit older.
especially, you know, when you're not as sure and as confident in your decisions, and there
Yeah.
probably is more peer pressure. But again, I think it's still that thing of like everyone else is kind of just worried about themselves. They're not really
Yeah.
a lot of the times paying as much attention to you. So
Yeah. I definitely find that now. I also think a lot of it had to do with like restructuring my community because, my ex, again, functional alcoholic. So always his friends, his family, like it was really all around me.
yeah.
And it was at a period of time when I was sort of, I don't want to say like isolated, but my best friend, who she's like my best friend of all best friends, she moved to Philadelphia, so she wasn't here. And my other friend lived across the island. I was out of my house, so I wasn't with my family as much. And then, like, that was it. Like, I had his friends and his life, and I was so inserted into it. And then it was like, before you know, I felt like a sim, like, when like the sim or like the Wii, like they bump into a wall and they walk back and they like try to go into a different direction. Like, that's how I felt. Like, I couldn't get out of it. And because I was in that frequency all the time, even the friends that I did have on a like a more social level that I had met during the period of time that I had known him, they were all also connected to that energy, even if they didn't know him. So I went through this like real period of reevaluating and also not having a ton of support because none of my friends were not drinking. And
Yeah.
I just like it pushed me to Al Anon, honestly. It pushed me closer to my mentor,
Mhm.
who um my mentor also, like, it's very weird. We have very similar life stories, but our exes who were both alcoholics had the same name.
Oh my
So
god.
she was like, oh, this part of my journey gave me this and this. And one of the things that she told me was Al-Anon. And that first year that I, like, let's say I stopped drinking in April, so December of 2021, going into that year, which was 4 months, right? 4 months before, or 5 months before I was going to stop drinking fully.
Mhm.
I'd already been going kind of back and forth with my sobriety journey, and we had had this long conversation because I had went to her house for Christmas, and in that conversation we talked about the serenity prayer. And I
Mm.
was like, I need to live by the serenity prayer this year, only to get sober 4 months later, which was wild to me. It was like not on my bingo card for the year, and it changed my life. And it's still such a huge part of my journey, my core being, who I am internally, and it really makes you look at things. Like, it really has made me, this whole journey has made me look at things differently. It's made me look at wine culture and mommy culture, mommy and wine culture, like, all together. And you'll see this, right? Like, you were just saying, that you're potentially planning your family, and then it's like you see out there, like, oh, live, laugh, drink wine, or like, God grant me the serenity to, whatever, and then like, and enough wine when I can't. And I'm like, you're taking actually the fundamental principle of this thing, of AA and Al-Anon and all of these sobriety journeys, and you're making it into wino culture because motherhood is difficult and we don't have the right support and resources. And instead of asking for that, we're seeing moms turn to wine and making it like that's a normal way to decompress when I can't manage motherhood. And I don't, that's not a shame against mothers, because it's a difficult thing and we don't have enough support, especially in this country. But like, it goes together. Like, all of these pieces kind of fit together in different ways. So where it's in your 20s, it's everyone's going out because we're all able to drink and yada yada. It's like, by the time people are getting to parenting in their 30s, it's transferring to like, I didn't know how to cope then. And this was how I coped. And I don't know how to cope now. So instead, I'll put my kids to bed and have a bottle of wine. And we can recognize, like, it, cognitively, probably not the healthiest thing, but it takes so much recognition to like move through this journey and to really get the right support, the right people. Like, it sounds like you had just way better community around you than I did. I had to go through like an uprooting of my entire community and being like, I can't hang out with certain people anymore because they don't get it and they're making me feel pressured to drink. And I was using language like relapse, even though I never went to AA. My sobriety journey was just like me cold turkey being like, that's it. Yesterday was the last day I ever drank. And going through that piece of the journey and then being like, people don't get it, and because you're not getting clinical help for it, or because you're going through it, there's like a connotation of what it means to be sober and what it means to have sobriety. And I just find all of this, so I know that I went off on like a million different tangents there, but to me all of this is so fascinating, because when you really look at it, you can see how ingrained it is in our culture, how it progresses through culture, and then just like the connotation of what it means to just say, like, I don't want to participate in this social contract anymore in this way, and how people then respond to that. And again, like, yours seemed a lot better, but like a lot of the social contracts that I had dissolved because they were like, didn't get it and they couldn't support me in it.
And honestly, for me, it's almost like we had just moved back to the Berkshires from Boston 4 months before I got sober. And so I honestly, I didn't have a ton of community. I had my couple mentors and like healers that I was working with, and that was
Mm,
really it. I had my husband who is very supportive of any choice that I make, and he did still continue to drink at the time and does occasionally. He wasn't drinking like I was. So I really did feel I think there was some sense of kind of I didn't have a ton of community around it, and
mm,
because again, I never did AA, and I mean, I was at the place where I definitely, like you said, I could have, and so, whether people look at it as not being as serious because I didn't like go to AA, I just found other ways, you know,
mhm,
to do it, um, but yeah, so it's almost like I was uprooted from that place and then had made the decision. And so it was just kind of and I wanted space though. I like wanted to be
mhm.
alone. I wanted to spend time with myself and get to know myself. Like,
Yeah.
so much of my life I didn't even know what like an empath or a highly sensitive person was until a few months before I got sober, and I was like, oh, this is why I
Yeah.
struggle with this. This is why. And so learning how to
Yeah.
manage the boundaries and manage my own energy and taking space. And so like I was sort of it was like the timing couldn't have worked out better in my life for this journey to happen. That's the way
Yeah.
that the universe works sometimes. And so I really beyond my like mentors, it was really just deepening my connection with like myself and figuring out kind of, you know, why else I'm here other than to like
Yeah.
drink and numb myself. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mhm.
That idea of being like that need for the hermit too,
Mhm.
it is so true
Mhm.
because just like you said, and you moved, like I would say similar, like I wasn't moving from Manhattan, but I was moving from Long Island, which is, Manhattan light.
Yeah.
And same thing, Boston's real young and a real drinking city.
Yeah.
So I would also know because I've spent a lot of nights drunk in Boston, but back in the day at least.
Mhm.
Uh, so I, like I said, I got the job at Omega, which was upstate New York, and then so I moved away from my whole life on Long Island,
Mhm.
and I was living with family, but up in upstate. But it was like my aunt and my uncle who, you know, they weren't they weren't drinking and they weren't doing anything. I didn't have any friends up there. So it was like, and I worked at Omega, which is like, for those of you who are unfamiliar, but you're familiar with the Berkshires, that is like Kripalu. So it's that very granola. There's no alcohol on that property. And that was where I was spending my summer. And then I got the job at Canyon Ranch and same thing. They were a dry property. And I moved up here. It was just me and Sherlock at the time. I didn't even have Watson. And same thing, it was like I moved up here, I live alone, I had my one cat, I had no friends. I
Mhm.
worked at in Canyon Ranch, I worked in such an isolated part of the building. It was actually in the mansion, which was considered servants' quarters.
Mm.
And where I was, because it was like floor one and then like one and a half, and then like two and two and a half. I worked on floor two and a half, which was servants' quarters for the property with whoever owned it beforehand. I don't know the history that deeply, but so I was the only person in my department in metaphysics. So it was like I didn't even have coworkers. So unless I went down into the resort proper, I wasn't even seeing anybody. So I was literally outside of clients and like getting up and doing my job. I was quite literally alone. And it was the best period of time in my life. I mean, you were already married, which I think is neither here nor there, but I like say it all the time. I'm like, the space to actually be alone
Mhm.
and detox, it's not just detoxing your body, fine, that's one piece of it. It is detoxing your mind and your spirit. And that is
Totally.
such a huge part of the spiritual piece of this journey. That's why if you go to AA or if you do Al-Anon, like that's why they work steps, because there's a physical component to it. And that's true. But there is such a deep intimacy that is cultivated with self, but it only comes from being alone and actually going in and having that dialogue with yourself. And you go through, I don't know if you went through this, but I went through like the 5 stages of grief. Like I was angry at myself, I was so disappointed with myself, I was angry with my friends, I was disappointed with my friends, then I was like bargaining, like sometimes I can drink on the weekends and do this and do that. Like you're going through all of the stages. And I remember just like waking up one day, I've been in the Berkshires now for 3 years, just about almost. And I woke up one day last year and I was like, look at what I've created for myself. Like, and it took 2 years out of this journey to like be alone and refine who I am and know myself. And again, like I really mean it to the core of my soul. I could not have done spiritual work, and I was doing it. I was doing it on the side. I was giving readings since I've been 16, but I could not have done it full time the second before I got sober. And it really opened something up. And it opened something up within me. And I think that piece of the journey that is the quiet, the solitude, and the needing that space here to figure out what you're even moving through is is actually the journey, and it's the piece of the journey that I think sticks long term.
100%. Oh yeah. It was like, it was 33 years worth of like thoughts and emotions and memories coming
Mm,
up, and which was one of the hardest things I've gone through, but like coming out on the other side, and yeah, just having that deeper connection and clarity,
yeah.
um and feeling alive again. There was
Yeah.
such a feeling of like deadness within me that
Mm,
I felt so like, I don't know. It's like, again, it was trying to ignore that voice that kept being like, you're not supposed to be here. Like in the full-time career that I was in. Like, and at the
mhm.
time I was in the hospital, and I kept getting these little downloads of like, you are not supposed to be here. And it's like,
Yeah.
what? Well, what else? And so I tried to ignore it. And
Yeah.
so yeah, but such a beautiful journey. Again, best thing that I've ever done, probably the
Mm,
hardest and the most rewarding though, wouldn't
yeah.
change it.
Do you have any spiritual resources, tools, tips that you would send people to if they came to you and they were like, I'm also looking to reevaluate my relationship with alcohol?
Mm. Oh, great question. I mean, for me, it was really like, I mean, Reiki, I don't know what it was. Every time I wanted to give something up, and having that intention and doing
Mm,
the self-healing, and um slowing down, and um just like, again, it's like the simple things, like taking
mhm,
time to be with yourself, taking time. I'm still with the same therapist, found a really good therapist. So I think, that's huge. But not just a therapist. I needed, other healers. And again, I didn't do AA, but if that's,
mhm. Yeah.
something that I think that's a great resource. But yeah, for me it was really that. And then also, like, when it comes to, oh, I don't wanna be, like, left out of my friend group, just, like, finding other activities and things to do that don't involve
Mhm.
drinking. Going to yoga or going for hikes
Yeah.
and stuff, like, I'll just, like, go for walks, like, I honestly, by the end of the day, like, I need to, like, recharge anyway, so I'm usually
Yeah.
just kinda home by myself, and not that I don't ever do anything, but, yeah, so finding like-minded people if you can, but, like, definitely, I say, like, I was kind of alone during the time, but also, and that's where yoga came in, and so, really just trying to find whatever community and spending time with
Yeah.
people like that. It's really helpful.
Yeah. I
Mm,
when I was working at Omega, we had all these, all the people that teach come in, they're all gurus, class experts, whatever. And we had this woman come in, and she was a somatic healer
mm,
who focused on people who had a lot of physical disabilities or physical trauma in their bodies that disabled them from having a able-bodied life,
mm,
and a lot of chronic illness and stuff like that. And she came in to do a session with me, and she did energy work, and I was doing Reiki on her.
mhm,
And I always do my Reiki sessions with, because I'm getting the psychic input, so I'm always like scribbling notes down.
good.
And we ended up talking about a bunch of stuff, and then we had dinner later that night together, and she was like, "Hey, I do this tea ceremony every morning. Would you like to join me tomorrow?"
Mm,
So I got up early and I went, and it was really interesting. We sat down and she explained it to me, and she said it's a very specific type of tea. It's a tea that you specifically go into ceremony with, and you are meant to drink it very, very hot. And mind you, it's like summer, and I hate to be overheated. I like to drink everything at like room temperature, but I'm like, all right, whatever.
yeah,
And she's like, we'll flip cards, but we're silent. And then she said, and when we come out of ceremony, then we can chat about what you experienced, or what you felt. And she was like, at any point, if you need to get up and move around, she's like, because you're probably going to get emotional. I'm thinking, lady, like, we're drinking tea and flipping cards, like my everyday freaking life.
Yep.
And it was so true because it was actually sitting in the silence. I could get choked up talking about it. It was sitting in the silence and reading the words. Even though I did this every day, I did not do it with the intention at that period of time.
Mm,
And I ended up just like breaking down and being like, oh, I need to be quiet. Like I've needed the quietude. And I decided after that, I was like, I don't want to do tea every day, but I had been feeling called to cacao for a really long time. And that
mm,
began my cacao journey because I was like, I need something like this. I need a daily ritual or a daily practice to fulfill me and support me in this period of time while I'm going through this transition for myself. And it was the most peace I've ever felt is or like the spiritual tool that I like really relied on was cacao because
mm,
it felt like an invitation and it felt where like you said, like drinking is that numbing feeling. It
mhm,
all kind of comes out, and cacao hits that heart center. So
mhm,
the first like 3 months that I used it, I had chronic anxiety. Like I would
mm,
drink it and my heart would be like palpitating out of my chest. But
mhm.
I recognized it from the spiritual perspective. I was like, well, yeah, this has been all closed off. It's opening up and it's releasing. So you have to just move through it. And after like 3 months or so, probably like 2.5, 3 months, by the time I moved up here and I continued that ritual daily, it was like a complete shift. And I was like, this is one of the most spiritual things I've ever done. And then I did that. I'm starting to get back into cacao right now, but I definitely do feel like it's a calling. And it was like, it
Yeah.
called me for a period of time. And then I was like, okay, I can hang it up. And now I kind of feel like I'm ready for that expanse again, but in a different way. So I love that
Yeah.
you said Reiki because that like definitely wasn't my go to. But I love that there are like just these different tools and what works for people, outside of like the clinical piece, outside of AA, or for those of, like I never went to AA, but I went to Al Anon because I didn't need to go to rehab, but I definitely needed support with other people who were connected to alcoholics. That
Mhm.
was more important for me, and especially to validate my experience since none of my friends or my family really understood.
Yeah.
So it's like getting what you need and having those spiritual pieces to, I think, ground you in is really important. So I love that you recommend Reiki because I think a lot of people could really get a lot of support from that as well.
Yeah, and the one other tool also, I love that. That's beautiful about the cacao. What a beautiful,
Thank you.
yeah, ritual. And like, so you said like ritual, and I'm like, oh, duh, like of course. And so I did a lot of breath work and
Yeah.
Kundalini meditations, and that's what I worked with my mentor. So having something I did every morning and the breath work to really help work on my nervous system and clearing, and also getting energized because I pretty much gave up caffeine too, like shortly.
Mm,
And just trying to use the power of our breath to either give us energy or calm us down. And so breath work
yeah.
has been another huge thing for me. So just wanted to mention that too.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah. Breath work is, I go in and out of it,
Mm-hmm.
but TM, transcendental meditation, I think you do TM too, right?
I don't
Okay.
actually. No, I
Um,
meditate daily, but I don't do TM.
yeah, that also as like a daily practice. You're supposed to do it twice a day, but I do it at least once.
Mm-hmm.
That too has just like knowing that I have the time to shut down and actually connect. And I think that's what sobriety forces you to do. It forces you to shut down and connect. And so knowing that I'm going to have that designated time every day always feels like a sigh of relief. So I love that too.
Yeah.
Um, there's lots of resources out there, but I just wanted to hear what yours were because I think it's helpful for people to also understand like you can get support from this, like just literally just to take it back to the beginning where it's like you need both. You can question your relationship to alcohol, you can question your relationship to how you are engaging with this thing that is so ingrained in society, and wherever you land on that journey, you can still support yourself with these modalities without, let's say you're somebody who just wants to practice sober curiosity for a couple months and see how you feel about it. You
Yeah.
don't need to make yourself any crazier. You just need to give yourself the support in order to be able to have that space of reflection somewhere, whether it's getting a weekly Reiki treatment or even a monthly Reiki treatment. Maybe you go 2 months without drinking and just seeing how you feel. And by the way, I want to say this because it's important, and we touched about this earlier too, but also making sure that if you're watching this and you're somebody who is questioning your relationship with alcohol, or who maybe needs to question your relationship with alcohol or substances in general, but alcohol in particular, it's another one of those substances that you cannot, kind of like opioids, you cannot quit cold turkey, which is why if you remember during the pandemic, they couldn't shut down liquor stores. And a lot of people who don't recognize this criticized that, like, oh, this isn't essential. Yes, it is. Like, you can die from withdrawals if you do not do this correctly. So um, don't just go into this journey blind. If you're somebody who is stumbling across this, or you're somebody who's listening to this and like, yeah, maybe I need to look at that, evaluate where you are before you just decide to stop. But if you do, or if you are somebody who wants to dabble in and out of that sober curiosity, or with sobriety in general, then those are some really great resources to do the Reiki, to give yourself space for breath work, and I'll tag some links here so people can get some information on that stuff. I'll tag Cacao if anyone wants to give that a go. Um, and meditation, just some meditations around what it is that is holding you back, even, and starting to just get into dialogue about that kind of conversation can really drive the story forward for you. But make sure that if this is something you're considering, you do it safely. Lovely, my dear. You have anything else that you want to throw in for the people?
No, I think that's it. And like you said, I just think it's even if you're just curious to see how you feel for, a month or two, I think just that curiosity, if it's leading you somewhere, and it doesn't have to be necessarily an all or nothing journey, but just
Yeah.
starting to be curious and explore. So,
Yeah. I love it.
yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So nice to be here.
My pleasure. I will send you this when it's all finished. And that way you can send it out to whoever you need to. And thank you for sharing your time, your energy, your knowledge, and your compassion. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
See you soon.
Take care. Bye.